So what we're going to be working today is a thing that I call, where am I, my slideshow, that I call knocking on archive doors in a variety of ways. And boy, am I ever glad that that we're able to knock on archive doors in so many ways now just because of COVID. And it looks like we've got something else coming at us again. Hopefully it's not nearly as bad as the other things have been. But I'd like to share with you today archives that are available many places, and archives to me are the place to go for information. We can go to a genealogy library, and I regard that as an archive because it's got lots of special one-of-a-kind things in it. We can attend some things out online, luckily, and then we can go after archives again in a very different way. And I'm looking to see how we're going to get this going. So are you ready to make an archive trip? I hope you are, and that you've done things like contacted the archive. If I were doing one right now, the one that's hot in Montana that I really want to go to is I want to go to the Yellowstone Park archive down near Yellowstone Park. They have some phenomenal one-of-a-kind memoirs and diaries for the period of time in which Yellowstone was first being explored. And then when it was becoming a hot item for the United States, we were considering a national park. And then once it becomes a national park, there's at least one other thing I want to look at there. So that archive is a very interesting place that I would want to go. Now, other places in Montana, of course, that we can look at the two main universities, University of Montana in Missoula and MSU Bozeman. We can look at the other universities and colleges in town. We can look at some pretty interesting places in Montana, like the United States Forest Service archive out near Missoula. So there are many places. If you're thinking of a place, for example, in North Carolina, or you're looking in one of the New England states or one of the mid-Atlantic states or the Western states, the beauty of things is that you can look online today to find all of this information that I'm displaying in front of you. So have you contacted the archive or looked online for hours of operation? And this is key right now, folks. If you're going to actually do an archive trip, two things you need to look at. You need to look at that archive for actual hours of operation and continue to look at it in case those hours of operation change in the light of COVID or something else. You also need to be looking, especially on Sundays, for when that archive might be offline while they are loading materials back on. Just begin to get an idea of where those things are. Find out what the rules are for using materials. What can you bring in? If they're really a strict archive, then probably only a pencil without an eraser. I'm serious. In Australia and in Norway both, and at the US Archive in Washington, DC, you're not going to be able to take very much material in. And what you do take in is scan. Usually they will give you a locker that turns out to be for free so that you can put your materials in there. But do not think that you're going to be able to take lots of research materials with you, etc. Not without a chat with security anyway. You need to find out beforehand if you can use a scanner. You need to find out beforehand if you can use a camera or what a picture costs, even if you take the picture. In Europe, many of those archives and even some of their libraries make their money that they run their libraries or archives off of. They make it by charging for those particular things. You need to find out in advance what copies cost and who makes the copy. Frequently, You will need to wait while they make the coffee, the copy. Coffee would be good too. Are you going to have access to a locker? Is there a parking lot? And if so, what are the fees? Can you have a notebook? Can you have a pencil? Don't even think pen. Can you have access to more than one file at a time? I'm just going over some of the common things that I know of. For instance, that you're going to run into if you're looking at a national archive or a regional archive in the United States, archives across the world. Sometimes places that are county archives might be a little more easy on you than that, but always, always, always ask about these things beforehand so that you're not surprised and they're not surprised either. You're going to need to read and research as much as possible from home before you go. So you need to be well prepared and be courteous, follow the rules. Don't try to work outside of them. You know, I am still telling people about my husband nearly getting us kicked out of an Austrian archive just because he took pictures from the door. And he thought it was fine. He did not have a hearing aid at that point, and so he sure didn't hear the rules. Luckily, I got to stay in. I just sent him out of there. You need to write a thank you, especially to those who paid particular attention to your research needs. Today, it used to be that you wrote those thank yous and sent them after you got home. You really can today, if you're addressing a particular person or a particular archive, you can do that via email. It can be a note that's dated that you leave for that person as you exit the particular archive, or you can describe the person or whatever. Usually they do have a nameplate. And of course, for you, I know we're all happy about things that we find immediately when we're searching for things in archives, but you need to write summary information of what you found and get it into your records right then, whether it's notes in a notebook or whatever. I know we all say, I'll never forget this because I found this particular piece of paper. And pretty soon it's a year later and you're saying, well, what day was that and which trip was that? Because I went to 3 different archives or whatever. So these are my hints for you when you're talking about going to an archive today. And I'm going to leave you this part with one real concern, and that is, I think we need to be prepared to regard all libraries, all county offices, and all actual archives as archives. They pretty much have the same rules, or they might have some things that are a little different, but please realize that the people who are working in these places, many times they are volunteers. Many times they have whole bunches of things that have been asked for before you got there. And that's why you really do want to take the time to introduce yourself beforehand and tell them the approximate day you'll be there and whatever, and ask what you can do to make the visit as cordial as possible. I found it pays big dividends. So I want you to think on how to access all of these original sources without traveling to them, because that's our lives today, pretty much. Beforehand, you've noticed that even if I'm going to an archive, I will have looked out there to see where the archive is, where the public library is, where the county records are for a particular place before saying, well, it looks like they're open 8 hours a day, so I'll be okay. No, you really do need to look and make at least an initial contact to find out what they are doing. Are they insisting that they get the information for you and give it to you, or are they going to allow you to actually look at books, materials, and so on? So there's great ways for you to look at our National Archives and Records Administration in Washington, D.C., because everything is out online. There's great ways for us to do the very same thing for our Library of Congress, which stores just virtually all kinds of things. It is amazing, especially to see the maps that are there, to see all of the different people that have actually submitted documents there so that you can look at them, or pictures or whatever. or organizations even that have done that. So they're very good. Of course, a place I'll always tell you about is archivegrid.org, because it's going to tell you about a variety of archives. And I'm always trying to get myself to remember to increase what I am doing with a particular place because that's just a very important thing for us. American Ancestors, which used to be known as the New England Historical and Genealogical Society, still has that name, but it does business as American Ancestors. And it has fantastic online archives, in addition to being able to tell you about the things that are there in special places for you. American Antiquarian Society is also located in New England, and it has at least some very good finding guides. I would love to go to this particular one. Haven't been to it for easily 21 years that I know of, and I've heard that it's really changed and substantially updated many things. Well, out online, you can go to Cindy's list to find a list of things that are constantly available, and sometimes they're even electronically attached so that you can go right into them. There's state historical societies. One of my favorites is Virginia. Another one has got to be North Carolina for what is there. But it's just amazing to see what's being scanned in and what's available. That's the advantage, by the way, back at American Ancestors, is American Ancestors it used to just do the New England states. Now it does a lot of the mid-Atlantic states also. So you're going to find lots of things that have been scanned in there recently. And they're not just births, marriages, and deaths. They are exact actual records from 300 and 400 years ago. And what they've done is said, hey, we know a lot of people can't come to us physically, so we're putting these out so that people can go to them this way. At Genealogy Bank, it's another one of the newspaper sites, of course, but one of the things that it has is the congressional record and lots of government records, which is why I listed here. Finding and using the OnLive archive places, if you want to do it in one step and you don't copy anything else down today, here's 3 places for you that are free that will get you many, many, many places. Family Search Wiki, and it's right here. And if you can't do anything else, just go out to the Family Search Wiki and it will wing you there. Your search term you need to use is archives and libraries. That's the search term. And then it will take you to their considerable list of those things across the United States and across the world. Another place to go is the Internet Archive, and it's actually archive.org. And it's going to do many of the same things for you. They're going to be arranged differently, but it's going to be there. At worldcat.org, your search term should be whatever your state archive is. Maybe it's Texas, or maybe it's California, or maybe it's Alberta, or whatever. But that's the search term that you want to put in, plus archive. And remember, you're putting these in quotation marks. But those are really the one-step, one-stop places where you can just get right into things. Via digital resources or in person, of course, I've told you about the U.S. Library of Congress. That's the LOC. And that's a place, remember, where you can also do newspapers, but the data collections are fantastic. The Montana Sanborn fire insurance maps are online right now, folks. They're out there and they're free. Many of the other states are too. You just have to look at their timing whereby they're bringing these things on, and they will tell you if you go out to search for it. If you're searching for Nevada fire insurance maps, they're already there. You can use lots of photos. Look for the ones that are in the public domain. There's fantastic things that I found there. And frequently, right from places like Bozeman, Montana. Who'd have thunk that at that point in 1917, 1918, Bozeman had a young woman who was so fired up about suffrage that She marched in Washington, D.C. and got thrown in jail for her pains. The pictures are there. There are research guides online at each state. And there's actual old-time guidebooks. There's nothing better for me than being able to look at an old-time guidebook for the people who first came to Montana in 1862 and finding out that there was an actual guidebook that could be used, and it's free. It's out online. At the National Archives in Washington, D.C., you're going to find all the things that I'm showing you here. How you can obtain a reproduction of a record, where where you can get right to those regional archives, like the place in Denver, or the place in Seattle that they're trying to take away from us. They haven't yet, or federal record centers or whatever. But think and go out and make a date with yourself to spend at least a half hour at some of these sites and find some things that you might like, or something that will work for you. Not everything's going to work for everyone. That's why I'm trying to throw as many things at you as I can, because even here at the National Archives, they're going to tell you, number 9, it says, we're going to show you the record groups that we have that are digitized. Wow, that's pretty cool, because it means that it's available. It's just one step away from your search for you. At the Internet Archive, which is archive.org, there's just fun stuff. It's a nonprofit library, millions of free books, movies, software, music. I mean, you name it, everything is there that you can think of. If you go into the American Library site here, which is only one of about 300 sites they have in there, there's over 3.5 million items in there right now. And so that means it's going to take you to a library that in South Carolina, in Georgia, in Louisiana, whatever, it's going to take you to that particular archive and to the items that are digitized out there. Still there, it's going to take you to European libraries. There's not quite 1 million objects there, but these are primarily books and records, folks. Or you can just go to Internet Archive books there, and books that you can borrow, over 5 million, almost 6 million books that you can borrow very easily. And these are, many of them, these are books that are under copyright, but one at a time, people can borrow them for free. Or newspapers, over 1 million items in newspapers out there at archives. And that doesn't, it's going to overlap other things like newspapers.com and Genealogy Bank and Chronicling America, but newspapers, one more way to get to them. Or maybe it's the Delaware newspapers that don't appear to be many places. Or maybe it's an independent site for Wyoming newspapers or Colorado newspapers or the California newspapers, because so many states have put their own sites together. And again, none of them have everything, so it's happy hunting grounds for you. One of the most fun ones here that I can think of is the New York Public Library, because it's constantly putting more things online. And it always was one of the neatest libraries I could think of. I mean, I, in Montana, could call the New York Public Library and get a person to answer my question. I mean, that just seems so cool to me, that somebody would be there and would be courteous enough to do that. At American Ancestors, that's that New England Historical and Genealogy site in Boston. If you've never been there, if you go to Boston, you gotta do this, because it's just too good not to. But they have a program right now out online for free. It's called Ask an Expert. So you can chat live with a family history expert out there and get quick research questions answered for free. And I've put the times out here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday through Saturday, Eastern Standard Time, or well, Eastern Daylight Time right now, I guess. But it's right on their front doorstep also. When you go out and look at AmericanAncestors.org, you will find this. And because of COVID, they have started this program, and they have said they think this is something that they will always keep. It's something that they get some pretty great questions, I guess. There are free research guides there, like Acadian genealogy from across the world, because they didn't all go to Louisiana. Some of them went right into the woods in Canada when they were kicked out during the French and Indian War. They were kicked out by the British, but some of them faded into the underbrush and stayed. Some went to Canada, some went to Maine, some went overseas. And this one is just a treasure and a powerhouse research guide for you if you have Acadian genealogy. Out at familysearch.org, the free help also has online genealogy consultations right now. They've had these for almost a year. You can sign up for a free 20-minute online research strategy consultation. And one that I did stretched to 23 minutes, and the person was quite courteous. And I did get an email back with some possibilities for where I could go for research. It's not necessarily that you're going to get the actual thing you need, but they're going to tell you how to do it. That's what they did with me anyway. They evidently thought I was a poor soul. At familysearch.org, don't forget their wiki. If you're going to do it, the first thing to search for is just familysearch.org and then go wiki and get to that. And you can shop for so many things. The Norway wiki topics go on and on and on. I just showed you the first page here. Everything's going to be up to date. Everything's going to be interactive. That means they have live links. If there's something that's out online, it'll take you right to it. It's really a one-stop shop. I found that the one for the wiki in Sweden right now is being updated, but they said that that one would be done soon. I checked Denmark. Denmark's was a little older, but still very, very relevant. And they did have all the interactive live links. I don't have Danes in my background, so I don't know how up to date it is, but it's so easy to find stuff at familysearch.org that it really is a place for you to go for a total research outline when you're getting started with a new area. Say that you're looking, as I am, and for many years you called your research Silesian, Silesian, and you're finding that mainly people have put this stuff under Poland now, and then you have to go to a subtopic. So now I have the job of going out to look at it that way. These archives are made for us today. They're publishing raw materials of scholarship and knowledge. They're digitizing their special collections. I mean, one of the reasons that I really like the University of Virginia and that I really love the New England Society, American Ancestors, is that they've actually gone back and said, well, we have to recognize a lot of people are never going to get to our library. It would be great if they did, but instead what they're doing is they're actually going through and digitizing stuff from the 16th and 17th centuries, putting it into books, and the book is a real bargain usually at like $50, and then you can have it anytime you want. Some of the things they're just doing them right online, which is why they do have their paid site. But hey, I'm just saying again, if you're in Great Falls, we have American Ancestors online up here for you to use. You're going to find diaries and original documents and dissertations and theses. And by the way, I like the dissertations and theses because I know a secret about those. They had to prove their evidence. It's pretty cool. You can get TV series based on book documents, government documents, the congressional record, all kinds of things that you just would not believe. And they weren't available 2 years ago even. Well, let's move on to the state digital resources, the memory projects, because the Library of Congress invested a lot of money. They got Congress to give states money for what's called memory projects. And those started about 14 years ago. And Montana has participated at least 4 times, for example. And so you can go out to this one place. There's a one-stop shop at the loc.gov site, that's Library of Congress. And what you're looking for is, if you want to just use a piece of terminology, put in state memory in quotation marks, state memory. They have a digital reference specialist who's always updating this, and she has done a great job of putting this free and excellent up-to-date list together. Warning, you better be looking at this about every 2 weeks because there's always something new that comes in. And that's another service of your U.S. Library of Congress, which is funded by Congress. So Congress did something. I'm just showing you on this screen share the 15 different categories of Montana Memory Project stuff that we have that is available to us out at our site from Helena. So they have 350 books that have been digitized, over 1,000 letters, over 1,000 maps, all kinds of photographs, 35,000 of those, documents, sound recordings, yearbooks, all kinds of things out at our Montana Memory Project. This is kind of a nice example of what it does. It has lots of art, lots of newsletters from different organizations, postcards. Every state will be different. So you need to look at these really carefully. And I like, if I'm starting a new state, I want to go look and see if they've got a memory project because it can really help you. For instance, the North Carolina Memory Project is out at digitalnc.org, and it includes scrapbooks. It's got newspaper clippings, business ledgers, manuscripts, written accounts from North Carolinians, past and present, and it goes back to about 1705 so far that I've found. And the reason being, at that point, you know, remember, it's not North Carolina, it's just Carolina. And so I guess I'd have to go over and look to see with South Carolina what they've got, because probably they split some of that up depending on the area. Let's talk finally about using a book as an archive. This one that I'm showing you is just really fun. This is that handbook and guide for the immigrant going west. This is one of the ones that showed Montana right when it was just becoming a territory. And I'm not going to tell you that it's in depth. I'm going to tell you that if you want to see a book that your immigrant may have looked at for the terrific cost of 10 cents per copy or whatever, but they may have looked at that and had it with them because it was the only guide that was there at that point. It was the only thing that they had. Yes, they could hop a train to a certain point. Yes, they could take part of the Oregon Trail. They could do they could look at some military maps if they went to a military post and looked at the maps actually there. That's right, they had to be on site. But these are gems because they're going to tell you and put you in time and place that your immigrant ancestor was there. So it's opportunities to read about your ancestor's era and the place. You know, people say, but wait a minute, I didn't find my ancestor. No, but you found her contemporaries. You found the mindset. If you're looking at the mindset of a lady who had to be, I mean, this woman was wonderful, but her book is called 15,000 Miles by Stagecoach. She kept going with her husband to the next place. He was the front person for buying railroad land. And virtually the first 5 years of their marriage were spent in stagecoach. Well, you'll capture her mindset in terms of thought, how bored she was at times, the conditions that they lived in. Wow, it's amazing. You're going to be able to find diaries by certain time frames and by gender that can be really helpful to you in looking at things. And I'd also say that when you look at those diaries, you want to be looking at the age of the person who conducted or wrote that diary at that particular time. It wouldn't be surprising to you to find out that not too many diaries get written by women once they have about 4 or 5 kids, but beforehand they did. You will be able to find some letters, maybe from the same community that your family came from. I know in one of my communities for my Beck family, the community in Minnesota does have some letters from some people who came in about, 3 or 4 years after my Beck family came in there. Well, I would consider that the same time frame and helpful to me in setting the scene as I begin to write a family story. It's not enough for me to say, well, yeah, I know they made it to this particular place. I want to know, and even just be able to write a paragraph, maybe not any more than that, that says, this diary told me that at New Year's, this is what they did. This is what Christmas looked like in this community at the Lutheran church. That's the one I found, Christmas at the Lutheran church. It was pretty cool. Every little kid got an orange. Wow. And the bonus that I want to talk about for a few minutes is, again, your ability and your willingness to become a really good critical reader. In many of these books, you're going to find by authors that have gone out to seek things like, say, somebody went out and found somebody's diary and they did what is called editing the diary. But in the process of editing the diary, they went out and verified the information that is contained in the diary. So they're not saying, nah, this is nuts. This never happened. And in the process of looking at that, they were able to capture other diaries of the same period or other public records that verified what that particular person did or what that group of people did. And they write about it as they look at and they show the source to you. And we call that a bibliographical essay. It's the reason why the author chose the particular material and the reason why the editor or the author did that particular thing. So when you see a diary or a memoir that has been edited, know that 99% of the time, you're going to find out that the editor did some more things besides just making sure the English was clear. They are going to be commenting about the sources and telling you where you can find other sources. Yeah, pretty cool. So when you see that little ed at the end of an author's thing saying, well, this person was an editor of this book. Okay, so they didn't write it. Oh, they did way more than that. Here's some books that contain original works. They're always worth reading. If you were back in the Plymouth plantation in Massachusetts, what became the plantation there, the Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford. This is the 400th anniversary edition. And it was edited and introduced by 3 people. A special introduction is there. And there's a whole bunch of other introductions to this person. Now, if you come from the William Bradford family, and lots of people do by the time you consider how many people have come down from that line, or you had relatives who started out, ancestors that started out in one of these early Massachusetts plantations, then you're going to want to look at the editing by these 3 people because it really tells you a lot. So it's worth looking at. Here's Merrill J. Mattis's book, The Great Platte River Road. It was a national awards publication, and he takes great care to tell you not only about the people who traveled, but also where you can find many documents. It's pretty neat. Or it could be a TV series. I know some of you had to have seen this Story of England years ago. It's been out at PBS for a long time. And it's the story of one particular place in England, a village and its people across about 5 centuries, told by the documents that they found. And it's a way for you not only to look at that particular place. No, your relative may not have come from that particular place or that particular 100, but if they came or they were in that particular era, you're going to get a nice overview of what England looked like and what places in other parts of England probably looked like. You're going to find out how the court system worked in that little village. You're going to find what happened with women who strayed. There, I'm telling you, there's interesting stuff. If you haven't seen this, go out to PBS and find The Story of England. You're going to find original works that are worth a read. The diaries. Remember, you do have to look at the biases of the author, and that's why you want to look at and see if it was edited. There's a couple in Montana that have not been edited at all, and I will just warn you that when you have one that has not been edited, be prepared to recognize that people wrote not too nice things sometimes, but it was in their particular time and place. It wouldn't go today, but it will give you an idea of place and time for your ancestor. You can find these at local and state archives, and some of them are being scanned. Some of them are out online. You can go out to worldcat.org frequently and look at diaries for Montana, and they'll begin to pop up. And once you find one you like, then you look over on the right side, because it's going to
an idea of place and
that are
time.
about the same.
Sure.
Someone needs to mute themselves, please. With memoirs, again, memoirs, those are memories, and you have to keep, you can read them, keep the bias of the author in mind while you do it, and the time and the place. But boy, that really gives you lots of information about the area. And it will also, if it's edited, make sure you're looking at the back for the notes. Hopefully they'll be really good. It's a real bummer to me when I pick up a book, perfectly good history, I look in the back, and yes, there are notes, but all they say is the particular line in quotation marks from where they got it in a certain book. That doesn't tell me anything about what the author thought in terms of this particular thing, not only why it was chosen, but why it's so good. Autobiographies, there's going to be limitations. Use it for the feel of the community and people. Probably when I look at it, if you want to look at the short autobiographies, that they're kind of fun to look at, but you've got to be wary of them. You need to look at who's who. Because remember, the people who appeared in Who's Who got to write the story. So they got to make themselves look really, really okay or good. So be careful, but Who's Who is always worth looking at. It's a starting place, especially if your person, your ancestor, operated some kind of business. Usually they appeared in a Who's Who. With biographies, remember, they're probably written by other people. They've been curated. That is, they've been carefully referenced. They've been related to a particular subject. So the author observations may be, if they are, that's the very best thing ever. If author's stuff is included, it might just be a sentence about it, but it tells you why it was chosen. And occasionally the author's even going to say, I read this book, I put it in here because I said it's not good. And that's valuable too. It doesn't happen very often, but you will find that occasionally. Sometimes an author evaluates the sources and tells you the best and the worst. It's guided reading. So you need to examine those notes at the back of the book. When I pick up a book, Linda just laughs at me, but she does the very same thing. We pick up a book and we look at the notes first. We look at the references. We look at all of the things that are there. And we say, well, you know, this looks really good. It looks like this person really has gone in depth. Our clue is looking at those particular remarks and finding out that the author has gone on to explain even more than he would have in the actual text. So you need to read the foreword because it's going to tell you why they wrote it. What are the notes by the author? And what are the notes by invited critics? What do they say about it? I don't mean the short thingies at the back, on the back cover of the book, although they're valuable too. But frequently you will find that, especially, well, when we look at things like Custer, you can't look at a book regarding Custer today without having a couple of invited critics who tell you about the story and give you warnings or or tell you this is good because, right in the foreword. So it gives you some good information. Look for those lists and maps and illustrations. And for goodness sakes, when you flip to the back, look for the appendices. I've found appendices before that are, remember, appendices in books frequently do not get indexed. So when you're looking at the appendix, it may have whole lists of things there for you that tell you things you cannot find any other place. So you have to judge the place and time, how it helps you to understand your ancestors' experience there, and write that note to yourself. Here are some books that can help you experience the times. The Chronicles of the First Planters of the Colony of Massachusetts from 1623 to 1636. These are their notes. They're not too hard to read once you get into it. Or something like Frontier Women. Their actual experiences by these people, first person. Or what a person wrote back home, even if it's not your ancestor. The Upper Missouri Letters of Andrew Dawson in this far off wild land in the 1840s. We're lucky that he wrote. So a bibliographic essay is guided reading at its best. The value is that it points you, the reader, to the best sources available for your relevance, your accuracy, especially, and usefulness in considering that person's viewpoint in that time, period, and place. It's a critical essay in which the writer identifies and evaluates the core works of research within that particular area. In other words, they summarize and evaluate the research work within a context. So they can tell you whether or not it's worth it. Or did they add this little tidbit that they couldn't get in any other place? One of my favorites for Wyoming happens to be a master's thesis from a little tiny town in the corner of Wyoming. It almost touches Montana, it almost touches Idaho, and it almost touches Utah. And this little community did a fantastic history. Of course, he was not permitted to put a lot of things in, but this man who wrote this master's thesis over 50 years ago included lots of notes about people. I went through and indexed that thing and laughed to myself all the way through because he got some pretty good things in there that he wouldn't have been permitted to put in a thesis otherwise. And by the way, it's tough. A thesis or a dissertation is not ordinarily indexed. So take the time to read it anyway, especially if it's historical. We've got one on Sand Coulee that was done about 30 years ago. It's a great resource for people here. Here's some bibliographic essays of merit. This is the best one in my mind that I have ever found. It's historical. It's on the left. It's called The Plains Across, The Overland Emigrants in the Trans-Mississippi West from 1840 to 1860. That sounds like a real dragging tale. I'm telling you, it's over 600 pages, but his notes about each place and each person are phenomenal. And he tells you that if you've got a story in your family that says, some of my family came out to Oregon early on, they were out there by 1845, and some others came about the same. It was probably about the same story. Wrong answer. No. This book will tell you how different it was, how much the experience changed from year to year and the improvements that were made so that we don't have that stereotypical viewpoint that you see in movies. This will show you some other things. And the best part is you really don't have to read the entire book. You can search in and search for topics and so on. John Unruh worked on this for 10 years and died right after it was completed. It's very, very sad. He was 39 years old. The other one that I think is just outstanding, especially if you're looking in the West, is this book called Wolves for the Blue Soldiers, Indian Scouts and Auxiliaries with the U.S. Army, 1860 through 90 by Thomas Dunlay. He's got some of the best viewpoints I have ever seen in terms of telling you why something is good or why a view is prejudicial. Very, very cool. And he just says it's prejudicial and it's the time and it's the whatever, but it's really good. And you know, these two, this guy was one of the first guys that ever got a liver transplant, and it lasted for almost 20 years. And he died before his next book. So you can find great original archival materials. I've named some things here, The Story of England, They Knew They Were Pilgrims by John Turner, The Grim Years Settling South Carolina. Oh, they were so grim. If I were a woman, I would have headed out. The Feud, the Hatfields and the McCoys, if you're looking at it, there's a book that's out right now that's really great. It's done wonderful things. And all of these have indexes, which I consider a real bonus. I do a thing called Thomson's Collection of Experts, and they're things that I've collected throughout my entire career as a researcher, not just in the last few years. I just didn't put them in writing till the last few years, other than notes everywhere that I gathered up. They reflect my reading choices, just like the things I've been showing you today. They reflect authors I regard as having useful information for my research as I do research for me and research for others, and say, God, this knowledge needs to go someplace. It just shouldn't be wasted. You also have your own experts, and I encourage you to develop your own list, but share it, because otherwise, if you don't share it, then it's like it never happened. All that information just goes for want. In Thomson's list of Indigenous authors, for instance, I have one that I do. This one is about, it's only about 10 pages, maybe 20 pages of different authors that I've found on every kind of Indian or Indigenous piece of information that you can think of. And I tell you the authors, sometimes I even tell you at least a short title of the book, but you will be able to find them. And I call this just experts specializing in. I developed this one from my list of stuff because the LDS Church asked me a few years ago to do one on Indigenous stuff to give their people some background. I have another one. I probably have 600 pages, seriously, of different kinds of things that I recommend across states, et cetera. I have one, though, that is real important to me called Reading to Gain Insights About an Era, a Person, or an Event. And as I find these experts, like some of them that I've been sharing with you today, I put them at the top and tell you when you're seeing them down here, JDT is mine. If you're seeing it down here on this first book in red, they tell you who has recommended this personal thing. Down here, the second one, Bernard Balin's book, Voyagers to the West, a 1986 book. So it's way over 30 years old, but it's got some really great lists in it for people who are looking for people who went to New England after those first people, after 1636. And the lists are there, and he doesn't index them or anything. It's like coming across the very best thing you could think of. I'm just going to stop this share briefly and show you one more thing, I hope. Will it let me share it? Yeah, it will let me share this particular specializing in. This is my topical index, list of experts by topic again. And I warn you, if you want it, I'm not going to send it out to everyone. You have to send me an email. Because this one changes all the time. I only do it as an electronic, but there's 39 pages of experts on, or 39 pages of topics with the experts listed, I should say. And it goes through every state for sure. It goes through topics like Alberta, aliens or exclusion law, Aleut Indians, loyalists in the revolution. And so, but I have 39 pages of those things. If you want it, send me an email to jennyt2162@bresnan.net. And that today kind of finishes my presentation. Whew, I did that in 52 minutes or so. That's pretty good. And hopefully, I mean, I'm sharing with you at this point a real love of my life in terms of those bibliographic essays and what they give you extra wise in terms of becoming a critical reader and considering the information in a different way when you look at things. I know you're not going to find your particular ancestor in a particular book, but if you are going after and looking at a particular era or a place, and it's a history, and you want to know more than what's there, you need to read those things. You need to become familiar with them. And you're going to find out that you can talk then intelligently about the particular era or the time, and you can at least talk about a person that they were probably in that neighborhood, or they were close, and they probably met that person. They may have been around that person. And that's just gold to me for what I do with my family histories and what I can tell people to go read and look at so that you can have a better experience with genealogy. There's nothing worse than saying, okay, I found the births, marriages, and deaths. Now what should I do? When you need to be looking at more and you need to be going beyond. I'm going to ask you for questions now, but I'm